A few weeks ago, I uploaded a video debunking the first half of the awful documentary Plandemic. But the second half gets even wilder, and I think the time has finally come for me to address it. So let's dive right in to the second half of Plandemic.
It's hard to ignore the death tolls. People have been dying. They are dying from this in quite alarming numbers. How do you reconcile that?
It's pretty easy when you see, for me, when you see what the government has done, and that is that they took, quoting Dr. Birx,
we've taken a
very
very
liberal
approach to mortality.
If my husband were to die, who has COPD, his lungs have fibrosis, his lungs would look exactly like somebody with COVID-19 theoretically, but he has no evidence of infection.
Okay, so the idea she's getting at here is that COVID-19 deaths have been inflated because she thinks that someone with an unrelated lung condition who comes into the hospital and passes away can be counted as a COVID-19 death. Well, simple enough to debunk this one. You don't get counted as a COVID-19 death unless you are confirmed to be infected with the virus. So if there's no test to confirm that you had COVID-19, you cannot be counted as a COVID-19 case or death.
I've seen so many doctors online that have made their own webcam videos, just perplexed by the protocol that the CDC had given them.
When I'm writing up my death report, I'm being pressured to add COVID. Why is that? Why are we being pressured to add COVID? To maybe increase the numbers and make it look a little bit worse than it is? I think so.
Yeah, I don't think so. We'll come back to this in a little bit. By the way, this guy's name is Dr. Erickson. I made a video debunking him a few weeks back. So go and check that out if you want to know exactly why you should not take anything he says seriously.
If someone dies with COVID-19, we are counting that as a COVID-19 death.
You don't die with an infection. You die from an infection.
Now, Judy here is a virologist, and as a virologist, she should be aware that oftentimes viral infections can lead to secondary bacterial infections, and that these bacterial infections are what are often most dangerous to the patients. So if you have a viral infection like COVID-19, and that infection causes life-threatening complications, then it's still the virus that is doing the damage. Think of it this way. If a drunk driver gets behind the wheel and gets themselves killed, then that is counted as an alcohol-related death. The alcohol did not directly kill that person, but it played a pretty big part. Same with COVID-19.
I've talked with doctors who have admitted that they are being incentivized to list patients that are sick or have died with COVID-19.
Yeah, $13,000 from Medicare, if you call it COVID-19.
This is actually a half-truth that Judy is really twisting here. Dr. Sidney McElroy of the medical podcast Sawbones actually did a really great debunk of this. I'll leave the link to the specific episode in the description. But the SparkNotes version is that basically this money goes to the hospital, not the specific doctor who makes the diagnosis. That's because when a patient is diagnosed with COVID-19, the hospital needs to order supplies in order to take care of them. And those supplies are usually pretty expensive for patients who are going to be in the hospital for multiple days. Again, that money is strictly meant for supplies that the hospital needs to take care of the patient. If that doesn't happen and hospitals and doctors start lying, that's fraud.
I want to know why Italy was hit so hard.
Italy has a very old population. They're very sick with inflammatory disorders. They got, at the beginning of 2019, an untested new form of influenza vaccine that had 4 different strains of influenza, including the highly pathogenic H1N1. That vaccine was grown in a cell line, a dog cell line. Dogs have lots of coronaviruses, and that's why they're not testing there. You could just say, oh, it was that.
Again, this documentary takes the approach of leaving as much detail out as possible so that you don't know that you're being lied to. Let's just unpack what Judy says here. First of all, what she's actually talking about is referred to as the quadrivalent flu vaccine. It's a flu vaccine that's meant to give you more coverage by including more flu strains in the single shot. And it has been around for a while. As far as I can tell, it wasn't newly implemented in Italy in 2019. Instead, it was approved by the FDA in 2012 and has been available ever since. So that doesn't explain why Italy specifically was hit so hard, does it? When it comes to growing virus to make this quadrivalent flu vaccine, there are two ways to do it. One is using chicken eggs, and the other is using a cell line. Now, a cell line are just cells that are taken from an animal, placed in a dish, and then grown in the lab. The cell line that can be used to make the quadrivalent flu vaccine does come from a dog. Judy gets that much right. But her reasoning as to why this is a problem makes absolutely no sense. Whenever a cell line is being used to make a vaccine, scientists have to check to make sure that no other viruses are contaminating that cell line.
As the country begins emerging from the worst of the coronavirus epidemic, one question remains. What happened to all the hydroxychloroquine?
We know that hydrochloroquine and zinc are working great for patients.
That would be an overstatement. There are some clinical trials that have been done to see if hydroxychloroquine can be effective in treating COVID-19 infections. And the answer so far is maybe, at best. There are studies that say it might be effective. There are some studies that say it's not effective. But overall, the most important thing here is that we just don't know yet. And it is entirely irresponsible for a doctor to be saying that this is a cure at this point in time.
And then Fauci comes out and says, well, there's no double-blind controlled placebo study, which, by the way, Dr. Fauci, is there going to be a double-blind controlled placebo study of your vaccine? Is there?
Yeah, they're happening right now. Why do you think it takes so long to approve a vaccine for use? Every vaccine needs to go through clinical trials, and clinical trials cost a lot of money and take a lot of time.
This is essential medicine, and they keep it from the people. Not only now, but back in autism with our discovery, there was an old antiviral drug, 100-year-old drug called Suramin, on the WHO list of essential medicine. It literally gave kids with autism a voice, a life. What did Bayer and Monsanto do? They took it away from everybody. You couldn't get it to save your life right now, and we tried.
Again, there's no detail here, and I have to look up everything. Okay, so this drug Suramin that she's talking about is a real drug that's usually used to treat African sleeping sickness and river blindness. But in 2017, this drug's effectiveness in treating autism was tested in a small-scale clinical trial, which actually showed some promise. It had some pretty good results. And so now larger-scale clinical trials are planned for 2021. So this doesn't look like something that is being covered up in any way. It's actively being researched. And the reason Judy probably couldn't get her hands on it is because it's an essential medicine, and they can't just go giving out essential medicines to Karens who think it can treat autism.
Is it safe to say that anything that cannot be patented has been shut down intentionally because there's no way to profit from it? All these natural remedies that we have had forever.
Absolutely, that's fair to say, and that's exactly what's going on in COVID-19.
If you have ever taken aspirin, you have taken a natural remedy. If you've ever taken penicillin, you have taken a natural remedy. These examples can go on and on. The idea that Big Pharma can't profit off of natural sources of medicine is just a straight-up lie.
The game is to prevent the therapies till everyone is infected and push the vaccines, knowing that the flu vaccines increase the odds by 36% of getting COVID-19.
Where does that data come from?
Finally he asks a good question. Why doesn't he do that more often?
A publication last year where the military who had been vaccinated with influenza were more susceptible to coronaviruses.
Judy. You finally make it easy for me and actually give me a source. And right in the conclusion, the very first sentence contradicts exactly what you said. This study found no evidence of increased risk of other viral infections following a flu shot. You know, at times when I was watching this documentary, I thought that they must be masters of deception. I thought that they were purposely leaving out details left and right just so that they could easily deceive their viewers. But then something like this happens, and I realize they're not deceiving us. They just don't have a clue.
And then to put on a mask.
This doesn't make any sense. We wear masks in an acute setting to protect us. We're not wearing masks. Why is that? because we understand microbiology, we understand immunology, and we want strong immune systems.
No, Dr. Erickson does not understand microbiology and does not understand the immune system if he thinks that people should not be wearing masks. Shame on him. Shame on the garbage he spews. Masks help stop spread of viral infections. Period.
Wearing the mask literally activates your own virus. You're getting sick from your own reactivated coronavirus expressions. And if it happens to be SARS-CoV-2, then you've got a big problem.
So again, we have a situation where Judy just doesn't give any detail, doesn't give any evidence, she just says stuff. And normally when I go looking for why she's saying what she's saying, I can find something, some half-truth that she's twisting, or I can get some idea of where she got it from. But in this case, there's truly nothing. There is no scientific basis for the idea of a mask activating your own coronaviruses and then making you sick. COVID-19 is a virus that comes from the outside. It has to be transferred from another person to you. And a mask prevents that. It does not activate your own. I don't even know what that means.
Why would you close the beach? You've got sequences in the soil, in the sand. You've got healing microbes in the ocean, in the salt water. That's insanity.
Is she telling sick people to go to the beach and get in the water? What? In case you haven't guessed, there is no biological basis to this one either. I mean, think about it. What are you supposed to do? Go to the beach and start guzzling some salt water to get those healing microbes, or start rubbing sand all over your body? This just makes no sense.
It's not the scientists who are in any way dishonest. They're listening to people who for more than 40 years have controlled who gets funded, what gets published. And I'm sorry to say many, many people will simply take the money and the fame and that support things that absolutely aren't true.
In science, there is no centralized group or force that controls what gets funded and published. If you want to write a grant in order to fund your project and you get rejected from the NIH, there's a long list of other places you can send a grant to. And if you want to publish your paper in a journal and that journal rejects you, there's a long list of other journals you can pick from. The point is, it's really, really hard to suppress data and information in science.
We've been taught now in our schools a very different science. You don't get funded if you don't speak the party line. You don't get published. That was probably the hardest thing for me to take, is understanding that scientific journals would twist the discovery that should have healed all.
Oh boy. Well, okay, keep in mind here that she's talking about her paper that got retracted. This paper was saying that chronic fatigue syndrome is caused by a virus. It was later retracted because other people could not replicate her results. Then, a year after it was officially retracted, she herself participated in a study that confirmed that her results were invalid. And now, years later, she is twisting the story in the most ironic way possible.
So what we did pretty much ever since I got out of jail, we started an education company. We wake up doctors, and it's very difficult. But every doctor who realized they may have been part of the problem has now turned that around to march toward a better society and restore faith in the promise of medicine.
Except Judy is working against that very idea by sowing doubt and distrust of very well done science and very well researched medicine. And that's it. We've made it to the end of the documentary. Wasn't it just the worst? I won't try to insult Judy or pretend to understand her motives, but I think what we have here is someone who is sick. She should know that what she is saying is wrong. She should know that there is no evidence for what she is claiming. She should know that what she is spewing to the internet is misinformation. And that misinformation is going to get people hurt. But you know what? Through all the misinformation, through all of the garbage that was presented in this documentary, I think that there's actually one thing that Judy and I can agree on, and it's that the mainstream media creates an unnecessary culture of fear around this virus. I just think it's possible to both understand that this virus is unprecedented and take it seriously while not panicking. So I'm going to leave this video on a positive thought. 100 years ago, we entered into a time in American history known as the Roaring Twenties. It was a time characterized by exciting growths in culture. We had jazz music, we had flapper girls, and there was economic prosperity to boot. But it followed one of the worst pandemics in recorded history. I'm talking about the 1918 to 1919 flu pandemic, which killed an estimated 50 million people worldwide and ravaged America. We had shutdowns, we had social distancing. It was bad. But we came out the other side stronger than ever. So just know that there is hope, that things will eventually go back to normal. In the meantime, stay safe and stay informed. I'm Dr. Wilson. This has been Debunk the Funk, and if you like this video, you can join me every Tuesday where I'll be uploading a video debunking whatever topic I felt like debunking that week. See you then.